read this story. I know everything you read online is true and factual. But I'm gonna assume there was a gentleman, a believer, going on a business trip. Got on the plane. He always took his Bible with him on the plane to read. So maybe that would start a conversation. We sat down and there was a gentleman, obviously of a different culture, sitting beside him. And this gentleman opened up what looked to him to be a Bible, but it was in a different language. So he tried to converse with this gentleman. And the only word that they could simultaneously say was, hallelujah. So the whole time on the plane, he would read, hallelujah. The other guy would read, hallelujah. Sometimes it's just that one word, and you have that connection with folks. And that's why, sometimes we sing something over and over and over, but sometimes we just need to say, hallelujah, God, you got us through wherever it is. And we can say hallelujah because sometimes when we don't have anything else to do, grace is going to hold on. It's going to hold on. You go, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. It is always there. And our response is just, hallelujah, thank you for everything you've done. Grace that won't come. Let us stand as we sing. Father, we don't stand here on our own. We stand here because of what you gave your son to do. That's what our did. Father, thank you so much. We stand here not in our own power, but in Christ's power. Pray that you will just speak your word to us this morning. We ask all these things in your holy name.
Nick preached such a powerful message last week that all week long in my head is the song, "Grace that is greater than all of our sin. What can avail to take it away?" And I just played and played and played. As I was asking the Lord to provide the message that He had for all of us today, I wanted to hang on to the idea that grace will never fail. And so if you think about our relationship with God, we wouldn't know Him if He hadn't revealed Himself. If we think about our salvation, we know that we can do nothing to create it or earn it or develop it. There's nothing that we can do other than to depend and trust in God and God alone and His graciousness for that. And as you think about what Nick was saying, the idea that grace, you can't out-sin grace. What Jesus did on the cross, He paid for all of our sin. This is absolute truth. We understand all of these things as the spiritual realities that we deal with simply because of the love of God. And so, as I was walking through this process with the Lord and just going back through all of that, the other key is that our salvation comes, it's by God's grace, but it comes through what? Come on, y'all. This is early. You can't go to sleep yet. Faith. It comes as a matter of faith. Abraham is the father of faith. As we watched the children's musical just a few weeks ago, and they talked about the fathers of the men of faith, the women of faith, and all of that. The crucial issue then becomes, what kind of faith do we have? Now, I hear this thing making noises. I'm not really sure why. Maybe we can stop. What kind of faith do I have? What kind of faith do you have? Faith is the issue. Is it a legitimate faith or not? There's no question of the quality of God's grace or of His mercy or of His love. And so if there's an area that can create problems, that area would have to be the intersection of our faith and God's grace. That even as God grants for us to have faith, do we have a legitimate faith? And so as you look in Hebrews chapter 12, in this particular passage, you see you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, like Jesus did. You have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by Him. For those whom the Lord loves, He disciplines and scourges every son whom He receives. In verse 7 goes on to say, it is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as sons. For what son is there whom the Father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, catch this part, if you're without discipline, of which all who are in the faith have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. So it is possible, according not only to this passage in Hebrews, but many other passages, that we would have a faith that is short-sighted or blind, that doesn't quite make it. In verse 14, pursue peace with all men and the sanctification, being changed more and more to be like Christ, and the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. Well, the good news about sanctification is that once you've really put your faith and trust in the Lord and you've been saved, you've been born again, not only is being made right with God, your justification, taken care of, but your sanctification is guaranteed. You are going to, according to Scripture, be made like Christ. And so, if there's not a sanctification process going on in the life of a person who claims to be a person of faith, there's no movement in the direction of Christ-likeness, then you have to put out an evaluation, a red flag, something that we need to look at. See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God. So in other words, you can be aware of the grace of God. You can even, in some way, religiously respond to the grace of God. In the parable of the soils, you have people who have dealt with the gospel, the seed hit in their part of the world, it landed in the soil of their life, and yet they came up short. And so not to come up short of the grace of God, so that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. In other words, there are some people who they start turning away. They become embittered by something. They generally struggle with a lack of forgiveness, the inability to deal with working through problems and struggles, and to know that in a place and time when we are totally dependent on God being gracious toward us, we also have to be prepared to be gracious toward one another. God doesn't show His grace by saying our sin doesn't matter. He gets involved with us in that area by setting us free from the power of sin and the power of death, and redeeming us for Himself. Now, a legitimate faith, if you just look at some factors there, when we give people the idea that having our name on a membership roll means that they're saved, they're right with God, that there's no proof, no fruit, no evidence. They couldn't be convicted in a court of law for being a Christian. It's not an act of love just to lead them there. In fact, it's a betrayal of the love of God, who truly wants people to have a real salvation experience, a real relationship with Him that is intimate, personal. And so to give people the idea that they're A-OK where